Hi, this is Reggie Batts, and welcome to another great episode of Mindset for Success. We have a great show for you today. We've been on a brief hiatus. We had a lot going on. We've been on a brief hiatus, but we are now back. We have lots of special guests that we're going to have. We have two today, and I'm going to also tell you about the show that we're doing next month, where we will have a special guest from Tony Robbins, someone that I used to work with, and we're going to talk about leadership, which is really, really great. So what is today's session about? Today we're going to talk about everyone knows that I'm a mindset coach. I work with entrepreneurs on their mindset and their business and whatnot. And so many people have asked me to do something on mental health. And full disclosure, I've been avoiding it because I didn't know how to address it. And I also didn't know, I wanted to make sure that we had the right guest on the show. And they were right under my nose, and they are here today. We have someone who has actually gone through it. And then we have someone more on the clinical side who's going to be able to give us advice on how we can really, really manage our mental health. We're going to talk about some of the issues that Josh has gone through and all of that. So first of all, I want to welcome my two guests. Thank you so much for being here. The first guest we have for you is Josh Trevino. He's a great friend of mine. He's a recording artist. You can find he's a great recording artist. As a matter of fact, you can find his music on Spotify and iTunes, one of the best out there. And full disclosure, I used to work with him. The company that I have was managing him and managing his career. And he was going through a lot of different mental health, mental illness issues, from alcoholism to suicide to anger issues and all of that. And I witnessed a lot of that. And I'm so happy that Lori's here, because I kind of want to get some advice from her on, how do you deal with that? Not just the person going through it, but also the person who is on the other side of it trying to help, such as family members and friends. So welcome, Josh. It's so nice to have you. We also have Lori Van here, someone who I highly respect. And Lori is a licensed counselor who actually, she's the go-to person for this subject that we're talking about today. So she is the person that works with clients on this topic. She has many, many books that she has written. She's a speaker. She's a coach. I've seen her on stage. I was actually there when she interviewed Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil has a lot of respect for what she's doing, totally supports what she's doing. And also Dr. Drew Pinsky as well supports what she's doing as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about her and her background and what she's doing. So Lori, let's go ahead and start with you. First of all, can you define, the definition, the mental health or mental illness? What's the difference? And then can you tell us a little bit about what that means, because it's such a broad term?
Well, I think we really need to transition more into using the mental health part. And the reality is there's really not a separation between your mental and physical health, because your brain is an organ. And I think that's created some of the stigma out there, is where we've detached the two, and we think, well, the brain is just all up here, and so the mental part is all in your head. And somehow it's okay to talk about the physical health from the neck down, but if someone had an aneurysm or a stroke, well, that's in your brain. So us differentiating and picking and choosing has really not been beneficial to getting the word out, as far as, no, they're one and the same. And so let's focus on, the health part and prevention, and not so much of that negative connotation of like illness.
Right. And then give us an example of some of the people that you work with and what you do when you're working with them. And has it, since the pandemic started, I've been doing some research on this. It's gotten a lot worse. So give us an idea of who you work with and the problems you solve.
Well, I like to say that I address the pain that other people don't like to talk about. And in particular, I'm regarded as an authority in the treatment and prevention of non-suicidal self-injury. So whether that's the picking, scratching, hitting, putting, all of the 25 plus versions of it, that's my primary world in helping those individuals. But very much related to that is suicide and the depression, the anxiety. I'm also an expert in dealing with perfectionism. And the number of cases of individuals that have come into counseling for the very first time because they're experiencing all of this anxiety and depression from the pandemic, it's significant. So many people have been reaching out for assistance because there's nothing that's prepared us for this.
Right. And is it all across the board, all ages?
Yes,
Wow.
it really truly is all ages, from your, what we'd say, the itty bitties in elementary school up to those that are seniors.
Right.
Especially those that have been detached from their loved ones because they're in assisted living and they're in lockdown and no one can visit them.
Right, right. I can't even imagine that, something, going through something like that. And Josh, you actually lived it. And by the way, everyone, I just want you to know, I asked Josh if there's anything that I shouldn't ask him or if there's anything that I can't ask him. And he agreed that he would pretty much answer anything. And he's helped a lot of people. He's been such a great example. But I was actually there going through a lot of the challenges that he had. And I have to be honest with you, it was really, really tough going through some of those challenges. Josh, can you sort of give us chronologically the path that led you to where that dark period of your life?
Yeah, I think that just going back to being young, I as I got through high school, I started to attempt to make music. And because of that, I was kind of targeted and laughed at a lot. And just certain people just did not like me. And so I got picked on a lot for that. And I think that going through those years kind of traumatized me in a way, because I started being really afraid of big crowds. I didn't like going places with like family members because I was always like super afraid that I was going to see somebody, and for whatever reason in my head I thought that they were going to somehow humiliate me in front of my family. And so because of that, as I got older, I started to use substances like alcohol. Was a good one because it just blocked off all of those thoughts. And when I found that as sort of the answer for me, I just kept going back to it and back to it and back to it. And eventually it's a daily thing that I did every day. And I thought the only way that I can be comfortable around people or just casually talk to people is if I have something in my system that kind of turns off those thoughts in the back of my head.
So did your family notice a change in your behavior? And if so, what did they do about it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about my family is, and I've heard alcoholism is, like a hereditary kind of thing. So I have a lot of alcoholics in my family. So for me, it was almost like most of them just looked at me as joining what everybody else does. My mom, on the other hand, she saw a big difference, and she since I was little, she was always pushing that in my head that, your family, there's a lot of alcoholics, so you have to be careful with that. And so when she started to see all these bottles under my bed and under my mattress, she definitely noticed, and we clashed a lot during those years.
And Lori, during the time when he was drinking a lot, keep in mind, we're friends. I was working with him. I don't think I've ever seen him drink ever. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen him drink. So were you hiding the fact that you were, because you were hiding bottles under your bed and things like that, but it got darker. So go to the next chapter.
Yeah. Well, once you're stuck in that vicious cycle, it's like, I couldn't really see a way out. Like, cause like I said, I have family members that are alcoholics, and it's, plagued them their entire life. And so when I start seeing that and thinking to myself, like, dang, this is how it's going to be for me forever.
Right.
I didn't want to live like that forever. So it's like, I used to always talk about, okay, I'm going to turn 25, 26 or, 27 like Kurt Cobain and just be done. And that's just, I kind of had set my mind to that because I didn't want to, grow up forever just suffering and constantly hurting people that loved me, because I didn't think that I could ever stop or ever find a way to control it. Like, I thought that I need this to live. So I figured all the heartache that I brought people and, myself, I felt like I was such a failure that I just wanted to check out.
And Lori, when you hear Josh and what he's talking about, do you see a pattern with what he's gone through with some of the people that you've worked with? And if so, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, absolutely. Things that Josh is talking about are absolutely patterns that you hear of. The secretive drinking, hiding it in the closet, in the bathroom, in different locations, and whether that's alcohol or other substances. And some people do drink a lot when they're around other people, but it's almost some of that more concern is doing it in private. That's one of the bigger red flags, because that also goes to a shame element too. And that as long as you keep something a secret, it retains its power and its control over an individual. And I've definitely worked with individuals that because of the anxiety, that's what started them on that path, what we call social anxiety disorder, where you have that concern of, I'm going to embarrass myself and people are going to talk about me, and just that anxiety keeps building so that it totally interferes in your day-to-day life, and you stop doing the things that you used to do out of this anxiety of being judged.
Right.
So yeah, using substances as a way to control those emotions.
And why do you think it's so tough? Why do you think it's so challenging for people to seek help?
Oh dear, I think it's the stigma. It's unfortunately, I think that, and the United States probably more than some other countries, just because self-injury as an example, still highly stigmatized in the United States, but in other countries, they have think tanks for it. They're actively working on discussing it and dealing with it. But mental health or dealing with it is seen as, well, you just have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
And the media has to take some responsibility for being some of the culprits of it, because the movies and the TV shows and all the things they produce that portray people that are, say, have bipolar disorder or depression or maybe schizophrenia, and they portray them in these horrible lights. So that's all the public has are these images from the media. And they're like, well, I'm not that.
Right.
Well, I'm not crazy.
Yeah. And then what about you, Josh? You were about to answer that question as well. So what do you think some of the challenges are as far as asking for help or seeking help?
Well, for me, because, as you know, I'm biracial. So my dad is Latino and my mom is white. But on that side, on my dad's side, depression and stuff like that doesn't really, like, we don't really acknowledge that. Like, that's not something that exists. Like, you have to, like, man up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, all that stuff. When I used to, act depressed or whatever, my dad would say that it was all in my head and, just get up, go do something. You're embarrassing yourself acting like that. Like, you just got to be a man kind of thing. And so that if you're getting help in our side of the family, you're crazy, and nobody wants to be crazy.
So you actually told your dad that you were depressed?
Yeah.
And do you think that he maybe he thought it was something else? And
I think he was just ignorant to it. Like, he just didn't know.
Wow. Okay.
And the cultural part is a really important aspect to address, because I've seen it, and I've worked in all different types of environments, from inpatient psychiatric and state hospitals and nonprofits and the whole gamut. And yes, the cultural piece is a really significant factor. And you have some that are, or of the mindset of you just keep it within the family, because there's a lot of shame to talk about any family problems outside the family. So it's very much discouraged if we need to put on this image that we have it all together.
Right. And then let's talk about depression, because we hear that term a lot. People who are experiencing depression, do they know what they're depressed about? Or do they just have this sense of loneliness, or what's it feel like? Can they like pinpoint what they're depressed about? I guess I'll ask you, Josh, since you went through it.
Sometimes it was just like, I just wake up and I just have this feeling like a cloud's over me kind of thing. And I can't really pinpoint what's causing it, which is what kept me in a cycle. And then, I would talk about, like, getting put on medication was also something that was very embarrassing. like something I wasn't supposed to do, which, you know, just speaking on that, since I've done that, everything has started to change for me. But yeah, I can't really pinpoint what I would be sad about. It was just like this feeling like you have this kind of heavy weight on your shoulder, and it just feels that way for no reason sometimes.
Wow. Lori?
Sometimes there's an identifiable trigger event. Sometimes it's been a whole perfect storm of things coming together.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you're struggling with depression, you have difficulty with your memory. That's not an uncommon symptom that arises. And you have difficulty with concentration, with focus. And so while you're in that cloud, which I think is a really good way to describe it, your ability to have that insight, to have that clarity is compromised. And that's where counseling can be of assistance, and medications and other treatment modalities.
So what would you say, Lori, what is the difference between suicide and, let's say, self-injury? What's the difference between those two terms?
It's intent. And it's something that I'm a huge advocate for, really helping people understand the seriousness of both. Because those that self-injure, that they intentionally harm themselves, it's without the intent to die. And you always want to assess that intent piece of, you can't make that assumption of just because there's marks on the wrist, oh, that must be a suicide attempt. No, not at all. You cannot make that assumption. When someone attempts suicide, the intent is to die. That is the purpose behind the act that they're doing. But for self-injury, the intent could be the release of the emotional pain and burden that they are experiencing. And there's an absolute correlation between the two of at least 60%. So those that self-harm, at least 60% of them have suicidal thoughts, or they've made an attempt.
So Josh, you experienced it, obviously. So based on how she defined it, where were you?
I was never like a self-harmer. I mean, I guess alcohol abuse is a form of self-harm, but I was more, I wanted to die, but I wasn't bold enough to, you know, get a gun and do it. And I didn't want to leave some kind of mess behind for my family or whatever. So when I tried it, I just used sleeping pills, and obviously it didn't work. But yeah, it was sleeping pills both times I tried it.
And after you took the sleeping pills, were you consciously aware of what you've done, what you did?
Yeah. Well, somewhat, because both times I was very drunk. But yeah, I knew what I was doing.
You knew what you were doing.
Yeah. The
Wow.
second time I got pretty close too, and I ended up like waking up in the hospital in a psych ward.
So what was the turning point for you? What was that turning point where, because this went on for years, if I'm correct.
Yep.
So what was that turning point where you just, or should I say, what was the breaking point where you just had to make a major change to fix this challenge you had?
Well, the alcohol abuse kept causing pancreatitis for me, so I kept getting hospitalized. And after the fourth time, and I had turned 25, I don't know, I feel like, because when you turn 25, your frontal cortex starts to develop, or whatever. And that might have had an effect.
I have no idea what you just said, but Lori totally understood what you said.
So I think that because of that, I just got tired of this cycle, and it's like, okay, I know I'm not going to kill myself because I can't be that selfish. Now, when I think about it with a sober mind, I'm like, I can't be that selfish and do that to these people. So it was either change, and I had been to different recovery things before, so I kind of knew where to go. And for whatever reason, I believe for myself that it was some kind of spiritual thing, but I just decided that I can't keep living like this.
So what do you do, Lori, when you know someone who, and they've attempted suicide, let's say 15 times, I guess on the receiving side, it almost feels like a threat, like, I'm not going to buy your story this time. The boy who cried wolf. How do you deal with that? Because I know people deal with that as well. So let's talk about not the individual who's going through it, but let's say maybe close friends or family. How do those individuals deal with this?
It's difficult. It's a very difficult situation, and it would be strongly recommended that they are receiving their own help and assistance. And from someone that's actually a qualified mental health professional, because everyone has good intent and everyone wants to be your buddy and be supportive, but not everyone is trained to know what to say and what not to say. And so getting the correct kind of support, because if you surround yourself only with family or friends, they're just going to tell you what they think sounds good, and it actually may not be helpful. So first step is, yes, finding their own support and getting accurate information. And then it is a matter of processing what's in their control and what's not. And the thing is, they can't control their loved one. Their loved one's going to do whatever it is they decide to do. You can only control yourself. That's it at the end of the day. So it's making decisions of, I can control how I respond to this individual. I can control the boundaries I set with them. I can control how much time and energy and effort I can give to them so that I make sure I don't get burnt out. The whole airplane analogy of put your mask on first, because as caregivers, there's a big tendency for us to want to take care of everyone else to the neglect and detriment of ourselves. And then we're not good for anybody. So I think those are some of the beginning pieces. And when you're dealing with substance, and I would say this for eating disordered behavior, I'd say it for self-injury and lots of things. In the end, it ultimately has to be that person who's struggling with it that makes the decision that they are ready to do something about it. I've seen way too many families that have thrown people into really pricey residential treatment centers, and they weren't ready for it. And I don't want to say it was a waste of money, but that's $60,000 or $100,000 that did not produce the result they were hoping for.
Right. Well, someone who doesn't have the resources, or let's say insurance or medical or whatever, where do they go? What kind of help can they get? I think there's a lot of those individuals, they don't even know where to go and they're just dealing with it. From your experience, what do we do with those people?
There are lots of resources. And one of the, if you want to dare say, benefits of COVID is that it's pushed online resources for mental health that much more. It's been a blessing in that sense, because for those that do have insurance is covering telehealth.
Right.
And for those that don't have insurance, there are, every single county, I believe, has some kind of mental health, mental wellness, government-funded clinic. There are tons of nonprofits that are on a national and on a state level that provide low cost to no cost mental health services.
Right.
You have national organizations like the National Alliance for Mental Health and NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, and Mental Health America, the Red Cross. I mean, there's tons of resources out there.
Right. And you're a resource.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. So I saw these statistics and I was stunned. And this is from 2019. And I'm sure with the pandemic, I'm sure these numbers are far higher based on reports that I've read. So in 2019, 12 million people had serious thoughts of suicide. 12 million. 3.5 million had made plans to actually go through it. And 1.4 million people actually committed suicide.
Holy shit.
I mean, that's unbelievable. In 2018, the second leading cause of death for people the ages 10 to 34, the second leading cause of death is suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even relate to that. Talk to me about that.
I think that really is where the true epidemic is in the United States. It's our mental health and the neglect of it. And the sad thing is, with some of the statistics, the numbers are actually probably higher than that. And I know this from experience in this world. There are several that were probably suicides, completed suicides, that were ruled as accidents. And for different reasons, because one, either the life insurance policy wasn't going to cover it if it was declared a suicide.
Right.
Or it was unclear that it was an overdose, but we don't know the intent. So they rule it as an accident versus it could have been. So those numbers are probably actually underreported.
Wow. Yeah, those are the numbers that they know about.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. And then Josh, so tell us, well, I have two questions, and I'm going to go to your transition to how you're living now. How, when you were behaving the way you were behaving, how did you want your family and friends to respond to that? Did they respond the right way? Did they respond the way that you wanted them to respond? Did you want them to respond differently? How did I respond? Talk a little bit about that.
When I was behaving the way I was behaving, I basically just wanted to be left alone. I had got to the point where people knew that I had an issue with alcohol, so I didn't like drinking around people, or I only knew certain people I can be myself around these people. They're not going to judge me for what I'm doing. But mostly I just started to do everything alone. Like I really just started to just be alone. I would get blackout drunk alone. And yeah, no, they didn't respond how I wanted, because I wanted to be left alone and just to be able to do what I wanted. But I luckily had good parents that kind of stayed on me and constantly were trying to get me help, even though I didn't want the help at the time, and it never worked until I did want it. But they never gave up hope that I would eventually get better. There was a time after I was 6 months sober and I had relapsed, and I tried the sleeping pill thing again, and I woke up on the couch in the basement, and my parents were sleeping on the ground next to the couch because they didn't want me to wake up and try to do it to myself again. Like that's how tough it got. And that was
because you have a family, who really cares about you and supported you and didn't give up on you.
Yeah.
Some people aren't so lucky, and they don't.
If I was left to my own devices, I'd have probably died.
So let's talk about who you are today and how you transitioned into the person you are today. I've seen two sides of you, and the person that I'm seeing today, the person that I'm talking to today, is so different than the person that I knew when you were going through that. It's almost like that person died. That person doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean, I am so proud of you. Talk about how you transitioned to where you are today and how that
I like I said, I had tried a couple times and failed. And so I got with this group, I guess you can call them. And I started taking their advice. This is people that have been through it, have lived it, have done everything that I had done, and could predict things I would continue to do. So when I just changed, I didn't want to change anything at first, but all they said was you have to just change one thing. And that one thing is everything. And so I did. I cut all the toxic people out of my life. I stopped going certain places that would be tempting at the beginning, just because I was so easy to fall back into that cycle. And it was a lot of alone time, to be honest, at the beginning, besides these new friends that I had made. And I just had to rewire my brain to be able to enjoy things like a football, like watching football or watching baseball, basketball, whatever, without having this drink in my hand, which had become almost like breathing to me. So that rewiring of my brain and just finding other things that I could put my time into. Like exercise became almost like a drug for me, because I really liked the feeling I would get after I would just get done. And then as I watched my body and stuff grow, that helped build the self-confidence that was completely depleted by the time I was done on my, rampage. So just doing that, sticking to a program, figuring out how I could try to right the wrongs that I had done to so many people. And then, going through and making those amends and living amends, showing them that I am like this, like I really am changing. That's when everything turned. I have a great relationship with my parents now. I'm very comfortable with who I am, and I have more hope for the future. And instead of comparing myself to other people, which would cause depression for me, and, I feel like social media has really amped that up with a lot of people, but just comparing myself to who I was yesterday and being better than I was yesterday has been a big help for me.
Wow, that's outstanding. That is so outstanding. And then Lori, and I actually want both of you to answer this question. What do you say to the individual that's watching this and maybe they have a little bit of depression, not enough to where they want to get help or something like that, it comes and goes, or maybe someone who's maybe thought about suicide, but maybe they're saying to themselves, I would never do something like that, but they still think about it. What do you say to that individual who may be watching, who may be going through something like that, Lori?
I would say that there's absolutely help out there. There's hope. It's very easy right now to have that tunnel vision and to only see the negative. And that immediate future seems so bleak, so dark, and it's so hard to comprehend anything else. But the problems that we struggle with now in the grand scheme of things are very short term. Suicide is a permanent solution to very relatively unimportant, non-big events, but a permanent solution to things that are passing. And so to really put that in context, what seems like such a huge deal right now in the context, in the whole scheme of things, it's going to pass. Just stick with it, get help, get the resources, and you can come out on the other end and be stronger and more resilient and have so much more insight. And then you can pay it forward to other people. You can end up being that light for someone else that's in the darkness. But don't give up. There are resources, and would love to be able to help in whatever way that I can serve.
Josh?
Well, as somebody who's been through it and has been in that spot where all you see is the darkness and it's hard to see that light at the end of the tunnel, I think that what helped me was talking to other people who have been through it and seeing what their life is like now. And when I was early on in that, I would see them and be like, okay, I want what they have, so I'm going to take the steps to try to get to that point. Like, at the very beginning, I had left out, I went to like a substance abuse counselor. I did a 90-day in treatment kind of thing, where I learned about mental illness and disease and stuff like that. And so when I was able to look at it from different perspectives and realize that right now, this very second, it might feel like I have nothing left and I have nothing to offer the world, and I might feel just awful about myself, but God doesn't make any junk. And, whatever it is that you're going through, somebody else has been through it and got through it. And there's help everywhere. Like, all you have to do is reach out, and I can tell you it's so much better on the other side. And that all that stuff that you were embarrassed about that you might have done or gone through, that can become one of your biggest assets. And like Lori said, you pass that on. So
that's fantastic. And then Lori, you've written a lot about this, and you have a couple of books that are out there, a couple of great books that are out there. Talk a little bit about some of the resources that you personally have and how people can get in touch with you.
Yes. So I've written 4 books on self-injury. and different levels of training for those. But the one that would be most applicable is a caregiver's guide to self-injury. So that's for family members, it's for school teachers and for nurses and anyone that's wanting to better understand this behavior that's an epidemic in itself, where I'm estimating from all the stats, and I think this is probably conservatively, at least 30% of Americans will have self-harmed at some point in their lifetime. So the stats are huge on that. It's not if, it's a when you come across it. And so there is the Caregiver's Guide to Self-Injury that's available on the vanassociates.com site. It's also available on Amazon. Those that are wanting to have additional resources, I have a private Facebook group that's NSSI, Non-Suicidal Self-Injury, Prevent, Educate, Intervene. And that's been a really great support for people from literally all over the world have joined this group to get information, to be supported, to ask questions. That's a totally free resource. And then I do offer online coaching groups for this particular behavior for teen girls, for women, and the caregivers. And we're always listening to the audience, and we want to serve. That's our goal. So if you have questions, you have specific needs, if I can't directly help you, I'm going to find the resource that can.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we, if someone comments, because I get comments all the time after a podcast, I'll make sure that we give those individuals your information and your website and all of that so they can get in touch with you. And then Josh, another question for you. I've seen people who have written you on social media thanking you for, because a lot of what you go through are in the lyrics in your music, and people hear those lyrics and they know exactly what they're talking about. They can feel those lyrics. You've helped a lot of people. You don't realize you've helped a lot of people, but you're helping a lot of people because you're an example of what it is. If you take the right steps, although it's not easy, it's really tough, but you made it through, and this is what you turned out to be. So in some weird way, maybe it was a blessing that you went through all of that. I know that's tough to swallow, but you're doing so well now. What does it feel like when you get letters like that from people, whether they send it on social media or an email, and you read that? What's the feeling you have?
I believe that everything happens for a reason. So I definitely was, I guess, in a way, destined to have to go through that so that I could in turn help other people. It feels good to read stuff like that, but I know that for me, this is going to be a struggle I have for the rest of my life. So I have to continue to stay at it, keep working, what works for me. And I've seen, since I've been sober since December 1st, 2018. And so I've seen 5 different people die since then that I knew because of that stuff. So it's going to be a lifelong battle for me, but I know without a shadow of a doubt that I can do it because I've seen others that have done it for 10, 20, 30, 40, even this really old guy that's done it for 50 years. So, it feels good to be able to help people. And I just hope, even if it's just one person, everything was worth it. If I can help one person, everything that I went through was worth it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I want to thank you guys for being here. I was trying not to do much talking because you guys are the ones that I wanted you to talk the most so that people can learn and people who are going through it and people who are family members and friends of people who are going through it. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time and really sharing your experiences. Is there anything else either one of you would like to add, that maybe a question that I did not ask that perhaps I should have asked?
I would ask for you, Josh, how important is it for you and to convey to others to know that they are more than their behavior? They're more than whatever actions they've taken.
Yeah, that's something that really followed me for a while too. It's like you're more than your mistakes. I was so focused on, once I was clear-headed and had, tried to change myself, I would be so focused on the things that I had done wrong to people. When I would be around these people, I would think, oh, they must only be thinking about this. Like, they must still look at me this way. But what I've come to learn is that people are a lot more understanding. And I think now, like, I give other people the grace that I would want to get back. And so, that little mistakes, nobody's perfect. Social media has made it so it seems like everyone just lives this beautiful life with, nothing ever bad happens, but we all have problems. We're all human. So, it's never too late to change.
It's never too late to change. And we'll end it on that. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the next podcast that we're having is based on leadership. Leadership is very important as an entrepreneur. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, leadership is important. It's not a title. You're not a leader because someone gave you that title. You're a leader because of the things that you do. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how you can succeed at that. Lori, thank you so much for being here. Josh, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And Josh, how can they get in touch with you? You're on social media?
Yeah. You can hit me up on Instagram at Josuevino, Josuevino. My music is just Josh Trevino. I put out a project called Suicide Note where I talk about all that stuff. So that's everywhere you can stream music.
Yes. And the lyrics, pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. All right. That's Mindset for Success today. Always be great in all that you do. And we will see you on the next episode of Mindset for Success. Take care, everyone, and be good, stay safe, and be great.